Hello and welcome to the Digital Photo Academy. This is Asif Raza. Continuing with our exploration of the various tools that exist in Photoshop, today we are going to be looking in this video at the spot healing brush, the healing brush, the patch tool, and the content aware tool. So without further ado, let's begin. So the spot healing tool, as it suggests, is basically literally fixes or corrects the flaws in a spot region. But that doesn't mean that you're just limited to a particular spot. You can extend it beyond that. My preferred choice is never to work on the original image directly. Always create a blank adjustment layer, which is an empty layer. I am simply going to call it retouch and ready to go. So I've taken the spot healing brush. Again, you have the choice of the size of the brush by going through the menu. Then you have the blend mode, so I'm currently going to leave it to normal, leave the type to content aware, and since I'm working on 2 layers, I am going to ensure that sample all layers is checked. And the behavior is fairly straightforward. So I wish to minimize or eliminate this red stripe that's going down the floor. So pick on a brush an appropriate size with adequate softness, and I kind of like to have lowered spacing. I prefer a smoother run. It may take a little longer, but so be it. So you notice where the crosshair is in the middle of the brush size. So I click, and you can see it while I keep the cursor clicked, the width of the actual brush. So I am simply going to run across and do it in small pieces. So this is basically what it's really doing, is it's getting rid of it and replacing it with that image that it has sampled by default. So if I switch off the background layer, you can see exactly what it has done in my retouch layer. If I switch that off, I revert back. That's why I prefer to do it in an independent layer. So now what I'm going to do is select it and delete it, because hopefully this makes sense to you. It's a fairly straightforward spot healing brush behavior. Then we take the healing brush. Now the healing brush is very similar, except that it takes on a sample from the neighboring regions. So what you can do is simply press the Alt Option key and your cursor becomes a crosshair, which allows you to click in that space and take a sample. So if you notice here, there's these gentle diagonals that are going from the left to the right. So you want to follow the pattern the way it behaves. So if let's say I see this delicate line in here, and I click on a sample over here, and once I've clicked the mouse button, then it's ready. And if I bring it over, you can see exactly how it is going to behave. So what you'll notice is that it kind of matches the environment. Okay, so it may not happen instantly. You may have to go over it a couple of times, but be patient with it. This works in a slightly different way than the spot healing brush. And once again, since I have a separate layer, I have the ability to eliminate that. So you can try and match it, use a softer brush, a harder brush, but that would be the behavior. So I revert back, and now we look at the patch tool. The patch tool is also an interesting tool. All of these tools have their own uses and may work well in one situation and may not work very well in another situation. So use them as you feel necessary. So initially you may have to go through some trials and see what works better for you, and then choose the appropriate tool. With the patch tool, the limitation is that you have to work on the background layer, because if I was in my empty layer, which I've set called retouch, if I tried to make a selection, let's say I've made a selection, but when I try and move it, it says, hey, it's an empty space, so what the heck are you trying to do here? So if I move to the background layer or choose the background layer, then what I can do is, as soon as I bring the cursor in my selected space, then I can click and drag it over. So I'm going to try and match the pattern as well as I can. When I do that, that is the behavior. Now you can modify this behavior. So currently I have a diffusion of 5. Okay, so if you check it out, the diffusion ranges between 7 and 1. So let's undo this for a minute and see what happens when the diffusion is set to 1. So once again, I'll make another selection and then move it over. So there's a subtle difference. Notice the edges are a little bit sharper, and if I hide the selection, you see this distinct line here. If I go to 7 for a minute, let's see what happens. And I bring it down, and notice the edges now are much softer and they blend differently, but at the same time it also leaves some residual information from the background. So work with the way the settings that you feel are appropriate and then make a choice. So that is the behavior of the patch tool. Now if I make another selection for a moment and I click on use pattern, then it chooses a particular pattern, and I can use many different patterns any which way that I want, and it'll impose itself in that region. Okay, that's one behavior. And if I make a selection and I click on destination, so it will transpose the source onto a second destination. And if I go back in here, uncheck use pattern, I don't wish to use a pattern, so I'm not going to use a pattern. So if I click on use pattern, then that's what happens. Okay, and I check transparent. Let's see what the behavior is. So it didn't really do anything because I've set it to transparency. And if I reduce the transparency, uncheck it, then it goes and heals it. So look at it with all the permutations that it has to offer, and then see where and how it may work. So for example, you may not be able to fix everything in one stroke, but you may be able to fix it in multiple ways, so or a combination of things. So let's say I wish to minimize attention or eliminate this space in its entirety. Okay, so to begin with, what I wish to do is once again create a marquee selection using the patch tool in that region, and then I come and click in here and I gently move over, making sure I don't cross over onto his head because then it won't be very pleasant, and I'll try and match that white line so that it somehow shows in continuity. So I'm struggling with it a little bit, but that's okay. And once I'm done, that's the behavior. So if this has not fallen, obviously you need to be a lot more careful. So if I were to enlarge this space and then try and move it over, then perhaps I'll have a little more luck. There we go. So now I am matching that white stripe exactly. So you notice everything has been replicated. If you don't want this, obviously you can go into the retouch layer, take a spot healing brush. So I've got a spot healing brush, and I could quite comfortably come in here and get rid of that. So, and I would perhaps use a slightly softer brush than what I have right now. I could do the same over here. And once I'm done with it, had you not seen me do it, you perhaps would not have ever noticed what had been done. Now, having done this, I'm obviously going to undo. So I am going to revert back to my original state of the image, since I really don't wish to do anything at this stage. The last tool in here is the Content Aware Move tool. This perhaps would be better explained using a different image. I have taken the liberty of downloading this image from the Adobe Stock Library. And what I wish to do, for example, so there are 3 hot air balloons in the sky. And I don't want this to be here, or I want it to be here, but how do I do that? It's fairly simple. Once again, you have the options of sort of starting with a new selection, adding, subtracting, or taking away and then subtracting it overall. So let's say I have the content aware move tool, and I click and I drag it around and place it. So now I have a rough selection over here. And pay attention to the mode. There are 2 options. One is extend and one is move. So let's start with the move. And then you have structure, and then you have color, and then transform on drop. So this is also somewhat of a destructive tool in the sense that it works on the actual pixel image layer. So I click and I drag it over. And when I bring it over, I now have the options of scaling it up or down. So let's say I scale it down. Okay. And I do it proportionately by clicking Shift and Alt or Shift Option. And once I'm done, I can hit the check mark or hit the return or enter key. So it may not happen immediately, but what you notice now, if I hide the selection, it has placed itself beautifully into a new space. So I have successfully moved it. And Photoshop with intelligence has actually done a content-aware fill in the space that I took this balloon away from. So if I undo this image, so I've gone back to the original state. What if I choose extend? So let's see what happened. And I've left my structure and color exactly the way it was. So once again, I am creating a very rough selection around my object. But this time, when I move, I still have the same behavior. And let's say I once again reduce it to create a sense of perspective and depth. And once again, apply at the end of it. Wait for it to finish happening. And you notice what it has done is it has copied the same object into a new space, and using the smart algorithms, it has filled in around and not damaged anything over here. So that is the basic functionality that's available to you with these 4 tools. I hope this made some sense, and I look forward to seeing you in another video where we continue our exploration of the various tools. Thank you very much, and you take care.